It's a new year, fireworks are going off, and everyone's kissing their girlfriend or whatnot. I have bigger plans. 100%ing a game that used to be a hot topic, earning over 100 million and being a bestseller back when it released in 2019, but it ended up losing all its traction due to bugs and lack of development, and to be honest, I thought it already shut down, but it turns out it's been silently running for years. But with only a couple weeks before it gets deleted off the internet forever, I set off to play it for the first time and not only completely max out my character, but complete all content and also attempt to cement myself forever in the leaderboards. If you haven't guessed by now, we're talking about EA and BioWare's fumble of a smash hit, Anthem. And I bought Anthem for 20 bucks early last year before it delisted, but I didn't want to start it until the New Year's next year to kick it off right, you know? It's time to see what this Destiny killer is about in its most complete state it will ever be. And it starts off pretty basic. You're run-of-the-mill character creator, pick from select presets with no customization, and I went with a default option since it reminded me of Zac Efron. But you only see that face in select cutscenes, and most of the time it's pure mech, which has a lot of customization from paint and parts and 4 different mechs to choose from. You get to pick one at the start and unlock the rest as you level up more. And after meeting the honestly quite good cast of characters, some of the storytelling and facial rigging that was going on with these guys were really good. Some not so much, but I was ready and excited to venture off and see what this game is all about despite its negative rap at launch, because surely all the complaints that stopped me from playing the first time are fixed after all these years. But between the game absolutely freezing and crashing the first time I returned from free roam, to monsters being stuck in the floor and never despawning, and also being required to be killed to advance the mission, I was not overly thrilled. However, in this case, I did have a gas grenade equipped, which apparently damages people through walls, so after a bit he did end up dying, but none of the explosions or anything from anyone else's mech could have done that job, so if I wasn't there, this rerun of a story mission would have been quite literally bricked. And to briefly summarize the story, you're a freelancer, which is the name of a dude with a mech, also known as a javelin, who fights monsters and cataclysms, and you and your band of brothers dive into the Heart of Rage to try to get the Anthem of Creation, which is pretty much this big power source that allows you to control the world, and the main reason why the monsters are such a big problem. But after biting off more than you can chew, your Cypher, which is pretty much Cortana from Halo, orders a retreat, which you follow, and your buddy does not, since there's been too many of his friends sacrificed, but you drag him away, which leads you to falling out with him, which makes you pretty much a freelancer, pretty much just a mercenary with your new Cypher, Owen, who wants to be a freelancer in the future, and you're just taking odd jobs until you get the order from a bigwig to save a dude nearby. So you save him, and then after taking some more odd jobs, you eventually find out that the Dominion, who's a rival evil faction, is trying to weaponize the Anthem of Creation, so you get a job to go back into the Heart of Rage to stop him, and Owen wants to help by piloting a suit, but you don't let him since he's untrained, and so you go convince your old friends who hate you to take a second crack at the Heart of Rage, and Owen steals a mech to try to help, but ends up almost dying, so you get pissed at him, and then you go treasure hunting, finding old tombs to try to get General Tarsus's Javelin of Dawn, which could combat the dangerous environment of the Heart of Rage, but those tombs have requirements, like resurrecting 3 randoms, and finding a bunch of random collectibles, or getting X amount of kills with your ult, which absolutely threw a brick into my story progression and enjoyment of the game, because imagine if back in the day when you bought Destiny 2, you couldn't progress the Red War and save the Traveler unless you res 3 randoms on patrols, except all the other Guardians are next to invincible because it's really hard to die in Anthem due to the lack of scaling. So after many hours of following the few randoms that were actually online and preying on their downfall, I eventually did get my 3 resurrections and could advance the story, where after going through some trials, you end up finding General Tarsus's mech, but Owen steals it from you because he's fed up with how you never gave him a chance to be a freelancer and joins the Dominion. And so you try to make a bootleg version of the mech to combat the Heart of Rage, but it ends up not working, so your buddy who was making it gets pissed and runs off, where he finds Owen, and Owen reveals that since he didn't go through the trials like you, the mech didn't work properly, and he ended up getting seriously injured in the Heart of Rage. So as an apology, he gives you the piece that you needed to take your own mech into the Heart of Rage, and then sails off into the sunset. So you take your mech into the Heart of Rage to fight the leader of the Dominion, who's already harnessed some of the power, turning him into this big boss monster with some pretty good raid mechanics. And then after getting him to around a quarter of his HP, your buddy, for all intents and purposes, hits him with his truck, and boom, credits are rolling, you save the world. And I'll admit, that's a very rushed explanation, but the main story consists of only around 15 to 20 missions, most of which are just filler, like kill everybody in this area, fetch glowing orbs, and then bring them back, or other menial tasks, and all of these missions I was able to easily breeze through in the first day. Credits are rolling, it's still January 1st, and a huge chunk of my playtime so far was just trying to get those 3 resurrections. But at least now we've unlocked the endgame, so let's dive into the core of any looter shooter. Alright, so your options are rerun the missions, but you can't pick them, just auto-filling into other people's games, or do various bounties or random tasks in free roam, The legendary mission, which lets you rerun a story mission with bonus modifiers. Do the leaderboard challenge mission, which is just a rerun of the stronghold with various bonus modifiers, which you get a score for. Or one of the 4 strongholds, which are pretty much just a dungeon, one of which is a rerun of a story mission, the Heart of Rage, and the others have you facing off against a giant bug boss or a turret. But throughout all your rerunning of the missions, you get loot drops, which range from common to legendary, but the rarity and power that they drop at is tied to your overall count level, and with me only being around level 17 after finishing the story, I took to non-stop random filling other people's missions for the next 5 hours to get to the maximum level of 30. And once hitting level 30, you unlock a higher tier of difficulties for your rerunning of the missions, which also allow you to bump the power level of gear that you get dropped up to a maximum of 80 if the item drops as a legendary. But there is a decent loot chase in this game. There isn't a ton of different pieces of loot, but you can drop masterwork versions of common gear which have set bonus modifiers like Voice of Courage, which removes debuffs, or if you get its masterwork or a legendary version in addition, it also resurrects anyone nearby, and all gear has random rolled affixes. Like if you look at my large collection of legendary Truth of Tharsis, I use one which has a 225% more damage modifier among other things, and I have so many of these because select gear pieces can also be picked up with gold, the in-game currency. So when you aren't using your gold to pick up cosmetics in the rotating Fortnite shop, you can use it on select endgame gear pieces. And at this point, I was like, Anthem's mediocre. It has some really good flying systems, but it's definitely lacking in content or general things to chase, because even for rolling for that perfect legendary weapon, there isn't much for you to use it on. And I thought that until I was able to matchmake into a full party for the Heart of Rage leaderboard seasonal mode, where it was really a struggle for all 4 of us to push the game to its absolute limit for a maximum score, and honestly, it was the most fun I've had in this game by a long shot. And then after getting my first wild legendary drop from this run, I was able to push my mech into an overall masterwork level, which is an achievement, and then after running it again with my new higher tier loot in a different squad, I was able to take those new legendaries from the run to make my mech into an overall legendary tier, which doesn't even give you an achievement, probably due to how unrealistic it is for the average player to make it through multiple Grandmaster 3 tiers and get lucky enough with a slim drop rate of legendaries. And with all this new gear, I was able to get into the top 500 for Anthem during the season, which has around 12,000 participants, and I would also argue that this season has the most amount of high rollers, since most of the big players are coming back for one last hurrah, and people have had the most time to put together their ideal loadout. So, as someone who's actually played Anthem, is top 500, completed all missions, completely maxed out with a legendary tier mech, and honestly it only took a couple of days, but I can confidently say that Anthem is a really solid game that had a sizable amount of potential. It's just a shame that developers never followed through. Looking through the patch notes, they had plans for a big Anthem 2.0 major overhaul, but ended up scrapping it because they figured their time was better spent on bigger franchises, leaving Anthem in a severely content-lacking state, which is disappointing. That Anthem's fate is forever just going to be stuck at what one could describe as a cash grab, and for it to be left running silently for years before deciding to pull the plug entirely with no plans on an offline mode or for any of this content to be playable in the future. Besides an Easter egg in Dragon Age the Veilguard benching General Tarsus, but regardless, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.